Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello again, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome to our listeners across the country and around the world to the Feeling Good podcast, episode 317.
Today we have a young professional coming onto the podcast with us, and David and I are going to be doing personal work with her. She's a young professional woman who was born and raised in Iran, and the anti-government protest that started after the death of the 22-year-old woman Mahsa Amini, who was arrested by the morality police for allegedly breaking hijab rules. She was arrested on September 13th of 2022 and died 3 days later. 3 days later, and that has sparked a lot of protest and the women life freedom movement, and women have been acting as agents of social change in Iran, and that has sparked a lot of feelings for Iranian people who are living in the United States and Iranian people who are still living there, who are feeling kind of paralyzed by anger and hurt and fear and a lot of other feelings. And so we're going to be doing personal work with Meina, who is with us today, and hopefully that will spark some healing for other people.
And a couple of the issues. One is that we're really at a time of tremendous social and political change, which reminds me of the 1960s when we were in the Vietnamese War, and there was so much protest and rioting going on here in the United States. And on some level, I think it feels good and feels exciting that the movements are starting up all over the world, and an increase in social consciousness. And we hear it on the news all the time that the women in Iran are triggering what might be a major revolution equivalent to the one that took place when they got rid of the Shah and went to a religious-based government. And so there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of terror in the world, a lot of horrible things going on, a lot of hatred right now. And then the question would be, does TEAM-CBT have anything to offer? When is suffering and pain healthy and anger appropriate? Taking social steps to change injustice healthy and appropriate, and when might there be a room to help someone who's feeling upset and struggling? And so I think that will be an important theoretical question, although we're going to try to do some practical work and see if there's room for practical work. And our patient Meina is we're just so pleased to have you with us today, and so let's make it happen.
Okay, let me read a very quick endorsement from somebody named Al, who wrote us about podcast 314, What's Wrong with Me? Al simply wrote to you, David, excellent podcast, thank you.
Well, that's great. That's our shortest endorsement at all. Did he say what he liked? Because we probably went over so many things with Matt May and that.
He just wrote, excellent podcast. Thank you. Thanks, Al.
Okay. Well, thank you, Al, for that great comment. We always appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And we just left you so that Meina could fill out the brief mood survey, and we could see exactly how you're feeling right now, Meina. And then you also shared your daily mood log with us with some of your event and some of your feelings and some of your negative thoughts. So let's start with the brief mood survey, and then we'd like to kind of hear your story. But right now you're feeling 15 out of 20 on the depression scale, and that would be a severe level of depression, 20 being the most severe depression a human being could have, and 0 would be ideal, no depression at all. Suicide is urges and thoughts is 0. Anxiety is 19 out of 20. So again, 20 is the most extreme anxiety a human being can experience. And a score of 19 would be beyond severe. It would be in the category called extreme anxiety or panic, practically. The anger also is 20, putting it in the most severe category. The most intense anger a human being can have. Your happiness, which can go from 0 to 20, I think on the brief mood survey that you were using, 20 being the highest happiness and 0 being none at all. So you're pretty darn unhappy. And then your relationship satisfaction with your partner, which can go from 0, which is the worst, and to 30, which is the best marriage possible, is only 19, and indicating a lot of room for improvement there. And then you also indicated that you've done some homework on your, excuse me for sneezing, some homework on your own prior to the session, and that you've been doing some flooding of things that are frightening to you. And then I might as well just do a quick summary for our listeners, too, of your daily mood log. And the upsetting event would be listening to Iran news on television. Again, when that's happening, you're feeling the whole depression cluster at 100%, the entire anxiety cluster at 100%. All of the guilt items at 90%, the alone and lonely items at 90%, the embarrassed and kind of humiliated dimension at 90%, hopelessness and demoralization at 100%, frustration at 100%, and hatred at 100%. And so these scores are about the most intense discomfort, suffering, struggling, negative feelings a human being can have. And the only session that I can recall in recent history where someone started out with this level of severity was when Marilyn came in and asked for live work, and she had just the day or so before been unexpectedly diagnosed with terminal ovarian or terminal lung cancer, and she was devastated and shocked. Her scores were 100 in every category, and yours are certainly very close to that. And then we know that the news itself doesn't trigger these feelings, but your thoughts, your interpretation, what you're telling yourself. And you gave us 6 pretty intense and devastating thoughts. Number 1, I'll always suffer because of being born in Iran, and you believe that 90%. And my heart will stop from hatred. Oh, also, you. I don't know if I mentioned this, that your hopelessness was 100, your frustration was 100, and your hatred also, you wrote in, is 100. And my heart will stop from hatred, and you believe that at 80%. And there's nothing I can do, and you believe that at 100%. It's pathetic that I can't stop feeling so angry. And that's 90% kind of a self-blaming thought. Number 5, I'm going to get sick because of these intense negative feelings. And you believe that 90%. And when you say I'm going to get sick, I think you mean you're going to develop a lot of somatic aches and pains and symptoms, which you have sometimes done in the past when you got very upset by things. You develop, somatic complaints, thinking you have some kind of brain disorder or neurologic disorder or some such thing. And number 6, they're going to be tortured and killed. What a horrible thought that is. And you believe that one at 100%. And so
one more. I have one more. I have one more. I'm going to lose all my Canadian and American friends. And then also another one is like my marriage is going to be negatively impacted.
So 7 is I'm going to lose all my Canadian and American friends.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what's the belief on that?
About 70.
70. And then why will I lose my American and Iranian friends?
Canadian.
Canadian and American friends.
Why would I lose them?
Mm-hmm.
Because of being in this negative state and being so bitter and angry, and like no one likes to be around people who are this angry and frustrated.
Oh, I get it. Thanks. I'll say because I'm so bitter.
Yeah.
And angry. Good point. And then number 8 was what?
My marriage is going to be negatively impacted.
Oh yeah. Well, is already, right?
Right.
And then what's the belief in that one?
That's probably pretty close to 100.
100, okay. Right. So we've done our testing and a little background. And what comes, Rhonda, I'm trying to figure out in team model, what comes next?
I think some empathy.
Okay, so why don't we see if we can do that? And, my heart goes out to you. I think the world of you, and it's
Meina.
sad to see you hurting so much. Tell us what that's like for you. What's been going on?
It has, there are so many memories that I didn't know that I had with watching the news footage coming out, but also it's not necessarily only news. I follow, most of the time I get my source of news from social media, so from Twitter and from Instagram, which is a lot faster from the mainstream media. And it's been really heart-wrenching. It's almost like this part of me that is traumatized and is angry and frustrated. And I've lived most of my life outside of Iran. So I was born there, my childhood was there, my teen years were there, and I left when I was 22. And now in my late 40s, and I always thought I'm Canadian. It has I've overcome my challenges as an Iranian, and all of a sudden I see these videos of women being beaten up and abused, and there are all these memories gushing out that I didn't know. I had panic attacks, and it's almost like I feel their anger and frustration. It's as if I'm there and witnessing it again. And part of me is hoping that this time they would stand up to these violent, brutal morality police, both men and women actually, who are part of these guards. And then it doesn't happen. Women get more beaten up, same thing as young men. And it was almost like re-traumatization of the whole thing, that again, we are being defeated. And it's we, because I feel like I'm right there with them in their experience.
Let me see if I can summarize what you said. Just writing it down. You're saying that when you're watching the news on television or checking out certain social media platforms like Facebook and others, that this triggers painful memories from the past, and then of course painful images at the current time, and this is all heart-wrenching for you, and partly because you feel like you're being traumatized, that you feel like you're struggling with them, and that you're all being defeated together. And I know one thing that you have that's a great strength of yours, but also a liability. Like all of us, our strengths and our liabilities and our weaknesses are kind of the same thing. And I know that you have a very vivid visual imagination, and you picture things in your mind that can seem very real and very physically upsetting and disturbing to you, and let's say I wrote something down here. I can't read. Let me see if I put my glasses on. Let's see. Oh, yes, I see it. It is. And you said that you left Iran. You lived in Iran until you were 22. And I know when you were a young woman, there was war going on between Iran and Iraq. And there was a lot of bombing. And you had a lot of traumatic memories being alone with your, I think, younger sister. Right. And your parents would be away, doing what they had to do in the daytime, and you felt terrified sometimes, even thought of jumping out of the apartment because you were so scared you couldn't stand it, and bombs were going off, and now you're beginning to have vivid memories of people being abused and seeing it happening in the current time, and that this is just something that you're experiencing in a very physical and way, as well as an intensely emotional way, and that you have so much love for the women and all the people of Iran, and at the same time you have a lot of hatred for the authoritarian regime, and that's why we're disguising your identity and your name for this podcast. That the morality police, and although I can't have anything of your capacity for feeling, which is vastly beyond my own, and your own experiences, which are vastly beyond my own, I can still identify because, in my upbringing, I saw a lot of this, kind of rigid morality, as you know, and I don't mean to knock my dad, but he was a minister, and I'm sure he was doing wonderful things for his congregation, but I saw a lot of that rigidity, and it's, my dad once said, you can't break the 10 commandments, you can only break yourself against them, stuff like that. And he was pretty sharply critical of people who weren't quite right to his way of thinking, and it was disturbing to me at a pretty deep level as well. And again, I'm not saying I'm innocent. I'm kind of an ass myself 3/4 of the time, and I can be very judgmental and very hard to get along with. But I understand very well the intensity of the emotion that you're feeling. Did I get that right so far?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that you also mentioned is, well, I think what makes this all more painful when it's in the context of religion is that the religious superiority, or, like that idea of that there is this moral righteousness, that they are better and that's the right way. And there is anyone who is not doing that way, they're lost and they're mistaken and they're misguided, and they need to be educated and
educated or killed.
Right. And if they cannot be educated, then killed, definitely. So there is that kind of superiority. That's perhaps part of my anger and frustration, because the defense of the Islamic Republic forces is that, U.S. police also beats up their own people. So we're not any different. It's the same thing. But again, it's very different when it's coming from that we are extremely moral and righteous and
and
it's in the name of God.
Yeah, that's why I don't identify with being religious at all. And I think spirituality is very important in the lives of all of us. But what I see so much of religion as being all about death and vengeance and torture and killing, and it's pretty overwhelming. I'm going to shut up and turn it over to Rhonda.
Well, Meina, you use the word heart-wrenching, and it is heartbreaking to hear what's happening in Iran and how it is especially affecting you. And one of the other things that you said was that you're watching on TV the women and men too get beaten up, and you're wanting people to stand up to the violent morality police, and yet they're getting beaten up, and that feeling of we're being defeated again, and you can put yourself right in there, like you feel like they're right in the midst of it. And I'm kind of wondering when you were there as a teenager, or when you were there I know you went to undergraduate school there, did you also experience being harassed by the morality police for how you dressed, or what?
Absolutely. Myself, my mother, my aunts, my grandmothers, all of us. But I'll focus on my own story. Unfortunately, I was very tall. I've always been tall, so usually the age for girls having to wear scarf is around 9. I had to wear scarf at around 6 and 7 when I was tall. Like my outside my hair had to be covered. And then also, regardless of the age, when you go to grade 1, you have to have your hair covered. So I just remembered how, from not wearing hijab at all as a kid, and then to have to wear this around your neck, and how it was like irritating under our chins, and your hair would hurt because it was like, it was all covered and you weren't used to it. You couldn't really play or climb because there are all these clunky things that we were wearing. At least, comparing ourselves to Afghanistan, it is, at least we could go to school. So I give them credit for that. But then, as kind of there were like guards and barricades on the street that they would stop our cars. They would harass people. They would ask my mom to cover her hair. I remember at some point, like there was someone, my mom kind of responded something like, I'm just taking my daughter to school, and she said like, shut up, you. Sheep is kind of equivalent of calling someone a pig in English. Cover up your hair, and he was holding a gun to my mom's face, like on just for like her hair showing up. Or I went to Sharif University myself, so like the footage of like the students being beaten up there was horrific, because also like we had experiences where my friends got beaten up in front of the same buildings. I got publicly humiliated and scolded because I was eating an apple in front of our lecture hall, and that somehow was a sexual arousing act that I did. Like I've been arrested for going hiking with my classmates who were both men and women because of that, and ran away. For going to parties where there was music that we have had to run away. And when I was 20, I was so frustrated that I shaved I buzzed my hair very short so I could go out as a young boy. And I kind of got away with it for one day. And we were hanging out, we were traveling with a group of friends, and we went for a little hike, and we came back, and we were staying at a hotel. It was a tour, but girls and boys were supposed to be separated. And because we went for a hike together, someone called on us, and the morality police came, but they didn't have enough cars to take us. So what they did is one of them stayed, and they locked us up in our own hotel rooms for more cars to come to take us away. And here I'm like, because my hair was short and because I wasn't wearing the covers, they thought I was a boy. So they put me in boys' room. And in the meantime, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to come back. I'm not a boy. I don't have a hijab, and I'm caught with the boys. So my crime would be being a prostitute, and therefore all goes, like I can be raped, I can be killed, I can be tortured. And then I'm away from my parents. No one can come and help. So I've never been that scared in my entire life, to the point that I decided I'll run away, that whatever it takes, if I have to kind of, get out of the window and, find a way out of there, I'll do that. If I have to kind of try to run away from the front door and not be caught, I'll do that. And it was a miracle. I did get out of the room as the guy's back was towards me, and I ran to the girls' room, was able to get in. And I don't know if he saw me, didn't know what was happening, or he didn't see me, but I was able to get away. But for the whole night, I was having a number of anxiety and panic attacks about what could have happened. And at the end, the tour guide was able to negotiate. A lot of times, unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, the situation gets resolved with bribery. So the morality guards were bribed and by our tour guide, and we were let go. But there are many instances, and I was one of the lucky ones that I have had friends who have got flogged in. I have friends who have been imprisoned and tortured and hit, and they're in much worse shape than I am. But I also wanted to add, part of my embarrassment is all these things were so traumatic for me that when I left when I was 22, I never went back. I have a hard time hanging out with, as much as I love my Iranian friends and old friends, it's hard for me to hang out with them because there is so much trauma and sad history there that when I am with my Iranian friends, my heart sinks. It's just so much sadness and as if our lives were wasted. And one of my negative thoughts was I can never get over my experience in Iran. And up to this point, my parents were always like, all your friends come to Iran. Why is it? What's about you? Why can't you go back? And why can't you face your fears? It's not that scary to go back. And one of my fears is what if I go back and I can't get out? Or what if I go back and someone tells me to kind of cover my hair and I say something and then, I'm put in prison and then I can't leave again. So that's one of the reasons that I've always kind of tried to stay away and intentionally suppress my memories of what had happened. And with these events, they all kind of opened up like a gushing wound, things coming up that I didn't know that they were there.
Now, when you talk to us, you're kind of chipper and you laugh and things, but you don't show that sadness, which I'm sure you're feeling. Are you feeling that right now or not feeling that right now?
I'm not. I'm feeling like my heart rate is really up and I feel a lot of muscle tension. And I think it's more, I feel so angry that I usually I kind of peak my anger and then at some point tears come afterwards. One of my friends, American friends, saw me at DMV 2 weeks ago and she said I looked shell-shocked at that point, and I really was. I had no kind of this flat. She actually tried to scare me, and by jumping in front of me, and I had no reaction. I didn't get scared at all, but it felt initially like being shell-shocked. And right now it's I don't want to cry.
Can I tell you what I heard you say? And I want to say too that, gosh, listening to you talk about that incident on the tour, my heart is racing and I have tears in my eyes thinking of you, with your shorn hair. I've actually seen you you showed me pictures of what you look like then. And I have that picture in my head of you and scared more than you ever have been in your life. And locked in the hotel room thinking that you could be arrested for being a prostitute and raped and tortured in prison. And, miraculously you got out of that room and ran to the girls' room. And I am so happy that that's what happened and that you were able to get out of that. Then you also, said that you consider yourself lucky because you have friends who were flogged and imprisoned and tortured. And, you describe this, from how you started to first have to wear a hijab when you were 6 or 7 because of how tall you are, and going to school in first grade, wearing your hair covered for the first time, and just the physical discomfort of, the irritation and your hair hurt and you can't play or climb. And, the idea that your mom driving you to school and being stopped by guards and having a gun put to her head and being berated and called a bad name because she was just driving you to school. And, all of that just breaks my heart and makes me feel so angry and sad, just sort of this overwhelming, like I said, to imagine that's happening for, you're also watching your mom get a gun put to her head, and, this fear that must have raised for you.
I think one of my recurring nightmares is that there is this sniper with a laser pointer on my head, and I can be shot at any given time. And my experience growing up in Iran was like that, because you never knew. Like they're kind of go in waves, so they kind of back down a little bit, and you can have your hair show, and you can kind of they're not very strict, and then there is this raid, and they kind of. That's what happened to this girl who passed away. I should say her name, Hasta Amini. Well, sometimes it's okay to dress like that, and some other times, depending on who you come across, you can get severely punished for it. So this kind of like the anxiety that's always there, and I honestly didn't know what anxiety was until I moved to Canada, and then I didn't feel anxious. And then, when the anxiety came up, so it took up, and then the act of immigration is really anxiety provoking, like to be able to kind of move to a country in the middle of winter. It was February when I moved to Toronto. I didn't know anyone, but I was so determined to leave Iran. It's just like I was telling my parents, I can't stand this anymore. Willing to go there by myself in the middle of, winter, not knowing how cold it might be or not knowing anyone. That to me was less scary than to stay Iran and to put up what we had to put up. And again, after being there for about 3-4 years, it's that then when I realized this is anxiety, this is called stress, this is called depression. This is not normal. It's not normal to feel this depressed and this anxious all the time. I couldn't really connect with Canadians because I was weird. I was someone who was always anxious and depressed, and I just couldn't blend in.
Like the baseline, when you were living in Iran, this baseline of anxiety level was so high, and you always had what is like a bullseye on your forehead. Yeah. And it sounds like it was really, which is the hardest. It was inconsistent that some days, the hijab could be looser, and some days you might run into somebody that demanded it to be very tightly around your head and protecting every single hair strand from coming out. And you never knew who you were going to meet, or was it going to be a light day or a minimum day, or a very severe day. And like you had previously you said you were arrested for you were publicly humiliated for just eating an apple. And so just living life that we take for granted in the United States and Canada, that when you moved to Canada, you came with that baseline of a really high anxiety and depression level, and that, you were willing to move to another country. The weather from Canada to Iran must be completely different. Moving in winter, not knowing anyone, and, having that struggle with connecting because you came with this highest level of anxiety, not even realizing what this is because you were so used to it.
Right. Yeah.
And then you said that when you got to Canada, at first you weren't anxious, I think you said, but after a while it got to where you were feeling anxious and depressed all the time and couldn't fit in.
So, initially it was like a lot of excitement, yes. But then I went back to my baseline level of anxiety and depression. And because, being able to to connect to other people and share your story is very important. The thing is, none of the 20-year-old Canadians, they weren't interested in hearing how I was mistreated in Iran or how I was abused or how scared I was. None of the young people are interested in learning about they all kind of they had their own things that they were interested, their own TV shows, their own music, dating. And here I was, like this really serious Iranian girl who was like wanted to talk about serious things and her own story, and no one was interested in hearing that. So one of the consequences of that is actually in where I was when I went to university, there was a man who was 26 years older than me. He was our group's biostatistician, and he was a hippie in 60s and 70s, and he traveled, all over the world, and he had spent time in Iran. So he was the only one who listened to my story. And even though I wasn't at all sexually attracted to him, there was a sense of connection. So I ended up actually dating him for about 6-7 years, which was devastating to my parents, absolutely devastating. So I was like 24 and he was 50. So in so many ways, that relationship was very healing for me, although it was tough in so many other ways. And that was one of my way of coping with it, although I'm not quite proud of it, but it was one of the things that helped me cope with all that baggage.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't know that story. That's so interesting. One of the questions, where does anxiety and a healthy, realistic fear set in? That makes it a little bit complicated. Where does depression end, and where does healthy sadness end? What's the difference between healthy anger and unhealthy anger? Maybe we'll be getting to some of those themes. How has the loneliness been here in the last few years?
I've always felt lonely in all my life, actually, both in Iran and also here for different reasons. I think in Iran was always that we were part of a minority, non-religious, secular group. So and you never knew who you could trust. So you would always have to hide that side of yourself, except with my very, very close friends.
You started to say that your whole life you felt lonely.
Yeah, and then moving to Canada, as I mentioned, again, I was way too serious for my age to be able, and also didn't know anything about the TV shows or some of the because things froze. I was familiar with the Pink Floyd and music with Jimi Hendrix, Beatles, like anything that happened prior to 79, and then also a little bit like with Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna, but not more of a local Canadian groups that a lot of Canadians were listening to, or alternative music, for example, to the degree that they were, or even the TV shows that they grew up. So I couldn't really blend in, and that was lonely. And then in the U.S., the other part is in general, because of the U.S. hostage, Iranian taking U.S. As hostages, many times I'd rather not tell where I was born or where, my identity. I also don't know what my identity is. Am I Iranian? Am I Canadian? Am I American? Like who am I really, if someone asks me, because I've spent time in so many of them, but there is this part of me who wants to hide any relationship with Iran, because I'm so embarrassed about the how violent the regime has been, and anything that people see of Iran is always horrific and violent. So it's not particularly flattering to say, I'm from Iran or want to talk about it, even though there are many amazing aspects of our culture that needs to, we don't get a chance to talk about because of that.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about, that was one of the reasons that, that kind of segues into the reason you don't want to go back to Iran.
Right.
Because of the violence, and you're not knowing if you go, maybe you won't be able to get out, or maybe you'll get put in prison because you're so used to, I'm guessing you're so used to living in Canada and the United States where you could say whatever you want.
Right.
And what if you slip up, that you intentionally suppress these memories, and that watching the news of what's happening currently with the the movement that's going on there now and the violence, they're coming back up for you. Yeah. And I wonder if they're coming back up for you even stronger because they've been suppressed for so long.
Yeah. And again, and that's when, like, I often, like, ever since this started, the first night when I saw the video of Sharif University students being attacked, I probably woke up with like 4 or 5 anxiety attacks at night. And then now it's like down to 1. So I wake up and my heart is racing and I'm out of breath. And then, I kind of am able to calm myself down. I do a bit of I forgot what's that term, David, like the memory prescription. Like basically I go and I don't do it for myself, but for example, I go and kind of protect the young girls, or sometimes in my head, I go to their prison cells and tell them to teach them 5 secrets in my head to kind of like, and tell them to be wise and just like, use their brains to get out of the situation. Those are my ways of coping with, like, whenever I wake up with anxiety. And then also, like, my husband tells me he doesn't know me. He doesn't know this version of me. He's never met this version of me who is like hyper, vigilant, on the edge, distracted. I tune out. I want to be on my phone on cover, follow the news. So, and he does not want to hear anything about it. It's upsetting to him. And both, but my dad says the same thing. It's just like, move on, like, you're here. Don't let it impact your current life. But then again, part of me also in my mood log, I feel really embarrassed and ashamed because I do have a cousin who is still there. One cousin out of the 50-something cousins that I have that hasn't been able to get out of Iran. And I also have some of my high school friends who are there, and I feel really embarrassed that I'm here and I can live a really good quality life. And when I go for hikes, I used to love our hikes, and now I go and I'm like, gosh, these friends can't do that. They can't do it the same way. So it's just, part of me feels really guilty about being able to enjoy life so much, where other people are completely deprived of the basic human rights that any woman would have. Not to say that in the US we have like perfect women's rights by any measure, but it's much better still.
Let me see if I can summarize a couple things you just said, and then see how we're doing in terms of empathy. But you said that when you first began to see the violence on TV, you were waking up with maybe 4 or 5 panic attacks a night, and now it's maybe down to 1. So maybe things are a little slightly better. And that one of the ways you calm yourself down is to do what we call kind of a version of memory rescripting, to imagine that you're in Iran and talking to the girls who have been, and young women who have been imprisoned, and advising them to use the 5 secrets of effective communication so they don't get beaten or raped or tortured or this type of thing. And you also said that your husband says he doesn't know you, that the loneliness has spread to your marriage. You're feeling lonely, I think, within your marriage now, and that even your father says, move on, don't be dwelling on these things. And so it sounds like you don't have anyone really interested in you and what's going on with you, which could make you feel further, worthless or angry or upset, certainly alone, and then and that you feel guilty too, because you have a cousin who's still in Iran and high school friends, and you feel guilty about all the positives you have in your life, and the good food to eat and safety and good work and people to associate with, and then you feel kind of guilty and ashamed. And then one other thing that it sounds like you've had to be hiding and suppressing your feelings a lot in order to get along in life, and to avoid people, telling you we don't want to hear that. So you've had to manufacture a persona. And that might relate to something that I was saying earlier, that, sometimes we're doing therapy with someone and they're sobbing and feeling intense emotion. And although your emotions are about the most intense that we would ever encounter, yet you're terrifically poised and articulate and can laugh and smile and joke and don't show any of that. So it is a little bit hard to feel that emotional connection with you. So I'm just wondering if I'm reading you right and getting it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I also want to mention my husband is American. So just to clarify for the audience who doesn't know my husband's, because many Iranians married to other Iranian men, but in my case, my husband is American. So he has no idea. He's probably heard more of my stories now than he's ever had before. We never talked much about my experience in Iran, except, if David, we were on our hikes and we were talking about me, but I've never really shared much. So yeah, this is all new to him.
Yeah. And, I've sometimes felt like there's a lot of loneliness in an awful lot of people. I've mentioned this to you, Rhonda, and on the show, and that we're sometimes not tuned into just how awful life can be for other people who look so successful and articulate and well put together. And so that there's just a lot of loneliness that ends up not being shared, not being acknowledged. How are Rhonda and David doing in terms of empathy? What grade would you give them?
I'll give them A+.
Oh, would you? Why? That's great to hear.
Well, it's amazing that there is great thought empathy and feeling empathy. I also appreciate you, David, mentioning that how me kind of I don't know if I'm intentionally keeping myself together, but I definitely feel that I don't want to let go, because I feel like I'm going to fall into bits and pieces and sob so much that I can't talk. But I also understand that it is harder to connect with that level, because I'm talking about these horrific things with a smile, which is probably awkward and off-putting too.
And your experiences have shaped you in this way that, it's you've been in survival mode since you've been 6 years old.
Right. Yeah. Earlier, actually, I was 2 when revolution happened. So it's been horrible, scary experiences from protests there and war soon after.
So Miriam, are you thinking that if you let go, you wouldn't be able to stop yourself if you started crying, or if you let those emotions out, it would just keep going and it would be uncontrollable?
Yeah, and right now I'm just so tense that I can't even go there. I'm feeling more anxious than sad right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a sense of relief. I should also say that it's I've never been able to openly share my feelings. So part of me feels I finally said that. I finally said how much I've been hating this, or how much anger there is, and it just feels good to let it out.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. It's
I'm glad to give you the opportunity that David and I are giving you the opportunity to let this out for the first time.
Yeah.
That feels really I feel really grateful to be here with you.
And same as I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I do hope that at least my experience is reflecting some of my friends' experiences. Part of me is also worried about again, I had it easy and I had it pretty good. So what if I'm being too selfish in doing this work? I have friends who had it way worse than me, and who am I here to be here and complain?
Should we add that sentence, that thought, to your daily mood log? I'm being too selfish.
Yeah. And I'm also weak.
I'm weak
because my friends have experienced way worse things than I have, and they're not as broken as I am.
This is a kind of a miscellaneous thing, but I'm sure you know Mark.
Yes.
And you probably know, he told me the story of how the night of the revolution, he was shot 5 times in the legs.
Yeah.
And they told him if he fell over, they would shoot him, the young revolutionary types. A really dramatic story of the violence that was inherent in the thing from the very start. And it's just so odd how things start out as one thing and turn into their opposite. It starts out, we're going to get rid of that corrupt Shah,
right,
and bring in religion and spirituality. And then all of a sudden, it's the same thing again. And did you ever see that movie, The Devil's Advocate?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's a fantastic classic, but it's about hubris and ego and how people get tied up in narcissism and thinking they're so great and so beautiful and so wealthy and so powerful, and then all of a sudden you're in this world of monsters and evil, and it's
very much like that. And the promise was really promise of democracy compared to monarchy, which and people wanted democracy, and it just took such a sharp turn. Ended up being a monarchy all over again, actually.
Yeah, right. Well, let me ask you a question here. What would be our goal in doing some this personal work with you? What if when we were done, you said, "Boy, that was really a great experience. That was so helpful to me." What goals would we achieve? What problem would we solve? What would change for you?
I think my biggest struggle right now is that I'm not in a position to be able to, aside from signing petitions, which I am, I'm really not in a position to change what's happening in Iran. And then on the other side of it, I'm really losing my effectiveness here at work, my relationship with my husband, with my colleagues, and also at work, I want to go back to like being productive and present and live my life the way, I'm not in Iran, but the way my mind is working right now is as if I were. So if a miracle happened would be that I'll be able to switch back to my old self, maybe even a better version of myself than before, that I'm doing great work and I'm motivated, but at the same time I'm not callous towards what's happening in Iran, and I'm still kind of connected and supportive of young girls and women who are fighting for their freedom in any way I can. So part of me really, really wants to help in any way I can, but there are also a lot of Iranian people here that I can support through my work.
So, and I think what you're saying is you'd like to be less upset by your negative thoughts while still maintaining your ideals and your desire to help and to make an impact, but without sacrificing your effectiveness at your current work, which you think is suffering a bit because of your intense anxiety, as well as I think your relationship with your husband is, I think you're saying is suffering, and maybe with some of your friends as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, and also my anger, right? Like I don't want to be living with this level of anger and hatred. That's kind of I realize how unresolved it is. I didn't realize how much anger and hatred was inside me for the morality police and all they have done to me, to my friends, to my family, and I would at some point want it to fizzle out and not just be in a box that can be opened.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good Podcast.